Everyone, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast, Author Edition. Today we have Jason Montoya with us. He's a content marketing consultant and the author of various books, one of them being The Jump from Chaos to Clarity for Your Striving Small Business, which is an interesting title. Jason, tell us a bit more about yourself and about what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Charles, for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Jason Montoya, originally from Arizona, and now live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Moved here in 2005. I made a jump. Me and my wife got married, went on our honeymoon, and then the day we got back from Hawaii, we packed up everything and moved from Arizona to Atlanta. So we made quite a jump. It was a very drastic journey, leaving everything we had knew to start a new life and explore our ambitions and ideas and stories and projects and companies. And it learned a lot in the process, which was a very difficult process, but learned a lot. Ended up having a marketing agency for about 7 years, from 2007 to 2014. Ended up shutting that down, and there's a whole story in there, and that's part of what The Jump is about, is the lessons I learned from that journey and why I made that decision to shut it down, and what that decision means for you and your business. And before that, so that was published in 2019. A couple years before that, I published a book called Path to the Freelancer. After I shut down the company, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I ended up having people say, "Hey, could I contract you to do this or that?" And before I knew it, within a month of shutting down the company, I had over a half a dozen projects on my plate, and I was a freelancer. And that continued for about 8, 9 months, and I realized, okay, this is really working. I've sort of taken the business model that I had in my company, and I've applied it to my freelance business, and I was able to be successful at it. And that ended up garnering attention of other freelancers, which they then asked me, "Hey, how are you doing this?" And I would tell them, and eventually that led to me writing a book where I put it all down, and now I can hand them a book instead of just telling them. So that's how the short version of those two stories. And I've been a consultant since 2014, and working with business leaders and founders to help them grow themselves and their businesses, because usually the growth of their company is intimately tied to the maturity and character and experience of the founder itself. So
100%. Yeah, I read your story. Unfortunately, I missed our last meeting for the podcast, but that gave me the time to even dive deeper. There's a lot to dive in on your website, a
yeah.
bunch of interesting topics, a bunch of cool blog posts. You're a great communicator, have an
Oh, thank
interesting
you.
story, and yeah, lots to deploy in the last bits of information you share. Why was it so hard? And tell us a bit more about Noodlehead, which is an interesting name, and tell us about the struggle in that story, because I read it all. I can relate to many points in there. You know, like when we are the masters of our own destinies and have our own agency, the pressure can be felt. Sometimes we all have demons as well in us
Yeah.
from the past. These are hard to get over with. It's a constant fight, and that is life. Tell us a bit more about your story.
Yeah. So when I moved to Atlanta, I was also going to college. I was newly married, in a new location, and I had ambitions to actually make movies. Was one of the things I wanted to do. And I ended up actually launching this political news website. That's how I learned some online marketing stuff. I had a background in video production. My uncle owned an animation studio, so when I was growing up in Arizona, I'd go over there after school during high school years and I sat myself down and taught myself how to do 3D animation, and worked on projects for him for the Discovery Channel and PBS and whatnot. And so when I moved here, and I kind of learned the marketing stuff, the political news site stuff didn't really go anywhere, didn't make any money, and I had to figure out something that was going to be financially sustainable. And I had these abilities, these video production and marketing abilities, and I had this Noodlehead idea was to make movies. So we launched a company. It was first called Noodlehead Studios because the idea was it was going to be primarily about creating, doing animation and video production, that kind of thing. And that was some of the first projects that I did. But then I ended up having clients say, "Hey, could you build us a website?" And so then we kind of turned into a marketing agency. And what happened, real in summary, was we started fulfill. We became a company that was defined by what our clients wanted.
Okay.
And so they wanted a website, they wanted SEO, they wanted email marketing,
Yeah.
they wanted this and that, and we said sure. And so we added that to our offering, and all of a sudden we kind of became this bloated organization that just did what was requested of us, but we weren't. We were lacking in intentionality, and
Mm,
at the same time, I didn't know what I was doing in a lot of ways. I was learning this stuff. Um, and struggling. So there was a lot of chaos in the business and how I operated and how I led and how I communicated. And I was newly married, and so there was chaos in my relationship,
mm,
and we were working together, and that created conflict. And so there was marital conflict, there was business conflict. Trying to make enough sales to bring into the business, to make payroll, making trying to make sure projects get done so clients are happy. It just feels like I'm juggling way too many things that I can't handle. It was beyond my capacity. So I hit a point where I had to kind of through the generosity and caring of other people, as well as just kind of reflecting on what was going on and how to improve, and just the sheer terror of the experience. Eventually, realized came to a point where I was like, okay, what is my life supposed to be about? What is my aim? What is my vision? My purpose? And really spending probably about a year to kind of work through that and some of my own deficiencies and issues,
mm,
getting clarity on that. And then once I did that, then it was about getting that same clarity for the business. Okay, so this is if I were to essentially boil it down to a simple question, about 3 years into the business, I asked the question: if I were to start a marketing company over, from like to start a brand new marketing company based on the last several years, what I learned, what would that look
mm,
like? And so I created a picture of what that would look like, and we as a team, committed to that, and then we moved towards that. So the next several years, we moved towards that process, towards that vision, restructured the company, our offering, how we solve problems, what we do, what we don't do, how we charge, all those kind of things. Some of the team came along with that. Some left, some new people came on board, and so that was we became an intentional company, helping other companies become intentional, and particularly with their marketing. We wanted to obliterate marketing neglect and help them become both accountable and excellent in their marketing. And we became successful at doing that. Good team, making money, kind of figured out a lot of things. And then in 2014, the short version of that story, the reason that I shut it down was I really kind of started asking myself, well, I before I asked the question, if I were to start the marketing company over again, what would it look like? But this time I was asking, if I were to just start over vocationally, would I start a marketing agency to begin with?
okay.
And I realized my answer was not yes. And in a lot of ways, I'd sort of been pushed into the company, to launching it, and as a reaction versus a proactive effort.
Mm,
And this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And that kind of gets back to the movie making and ideas and storytelling and things like that. And so I realized, to do it well, to do it with excellence and accountability, requires to be fully committed to the company. And I couldn't fully commit to this marketing company, so I ended up shutting it down. And back to the name that you mentioned, Noodlehead, it was kind of a nickname that I had growing up. I have curly hair, and it was just this fun spirit. And in a lot of ways, the marketing, it's a little over 7 years, I guess, this marketing journey and this marketing agency that started with me and my wife, and had, I think, 12 or 13 people at one point. Um, we It was really kind of a cocoon for me, like, to learn and to grow and to suffer and to face conflict and trials, but eventually it was to come out of that cocoon, and
mm.
that meant shutting it down. But I was able to take the lessons learned. I grew as a person, and that was something I was able to apply when I shifted to freelancing and consulting after that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so much to uncover here. You and I share a lot. We both jumped into entrepreneurship pretty much at the same time as we committed to a partner, in the sacred union, as I call.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you jumped in there too early, or that you shouldn't have mixed relationship with business? Because I tried mixing business with relationship with my wife. It didn't work out many times. To this day, we work together a little bit together. But we try to not separate these things because I talk to her about business all the time. That's pretty much my passion, just like her is
Yeah.
like TikTok and photography and all of these things. But was it like, because these are huge leaps, you know, one, starting something entrepreneurial, two, committing to someone. Do you feel that you've taken too many big jumps at the same time and that you were close to burning out? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to answer because um it's a there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I'll use an analogy here. When I used to play, I'm a computer gamer, so I like playing games on the computer. And when I was growing up, one of the things I used to do is I would go to when I started the game, I would play it on the most difficult setting as possible.
Okay.
So as hard as it could. And I would get brutally like destroyed in the game, right? But I learned really quickly, right? And
Mhm.
so I had to, in order to overcome that challenge, I had to get really good really fast, and so then I would be able to do those levels and stuff in the game.
Sure.
And so in a similar way, that's kind of how it was with life. Um, it was very intense, like you mentioned, all the things we did, what most people do in a lifetime, we did in a weekend.
Mhm.
Moving across the country, getting married, going to college, starting a business, all these things.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very difficult. And if I were to do it again, I would probably pace it differently. Um, I think one of the couple of the challenges from a marital standpoint was me and my wife were just so different personality wise, upbringing wise. We had a lot
Same
of
here.
just clash, and that clash seeped into the business.
Mm.
Um, but I would say a couple things. Those same types of clashes, when my wife left the business, I still had to deal with those types of clashes with other people in
Yep.
the
Yeah.
business. So those conflicts aren't always absent, although sometimes untangling it can make it a little easier.
Yeah.
It doesn't get rid of them altogether. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The
Mm.
other thing I would say is um, I think there is a maturity and a personality differences that there are scenarios that others have had. This wasn't my experience, that they have worked together and it worked a lot better for them,
Mm.
just because the factors kind of aligned better. I
Yeah.
think me and my wife could work better now. I mean, we've been married for 17 years, and we've
Wow.
kind of worked through a lot of things, and we're different people, and so it'd be a different story for us
Yeah.
working together now than it was then. And in
Mm.
a lot of ways, I've learned things from her that have made me better, and she's learned things from me, that so together we've shared things that both of us were missing things, and we
Yeah.
added to each other, and so
Mm.
that makes us both stronger. But for the other aspect, I would say, is a lot of the clients I work with now, even in the past, it's fairly common that a married couple is the founder couple.
Mm.
They are leading the company, and so a lot of times my consulting and coaching often veers into marriage counseling, and I get that opportunity to help them in ways that, hey, this is my experience and how I've how we navigated that and troubles I faced, and helping both of them um, to speak what they need to speak so that the other person hears it,
Okay.
and that they're you know both being heard, and then that by being heard, then we can find a pathway forward. And sometimes, what we often dismiss each other. I think this is one of the challenges with just working with family, is we can often dismiss a family member maybe more easily than we might if it was an employee or a colleague. And so that's a dynamic that can cause issues for sure.
Yeah. The main team also is maturity.
Yeah.
I mean, you started your relationship quite young. Even up to this day, you look quite young, you know? Like you,
Yeah.
without your
So
birds, you could look maybe
yeah.
18.
Oh yeah,
On
yeah.
my part here,
Yeah.
but
So I was
yeah,
84. So I'll be 38 this year. And but yeah, I definitely do look young for my age, and
which is
so
like an amazing thing.
that'll work out to my advantage. But
Yeah.
even not looking young, I did get married early. I mean, I was 20
Yeah.
when I got married. So
Sure. Yeah. Like I'm 28, and I mean, I've been engaged with her for quite a while, but only next year we're gonna do the official thing. And
Yeah.
maturity is an interesting team. Just like you, I also so the business, the sacred union, and the traveling. I
Yeah.
also did it, but the traveling was more extreme because we
Mm.
did the digital nomad life, and
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
no foot on the ground for a good 3 years. Every month, a
Yeah.
new country, and so forth. Even when we would stay in Mexico during the pandemic, constantly changing states just because it's cool. But yeah, maturity is definitely a part of it. Communication skills on both sides. How you learn to communicate your emotions, especially as a man, it's tough. Especially as an introvert and someone that is radically independent like myself. I've solved my own things for God knows how long.
Yeah.
And yeah, use my wife as a supporter and someone that can listen to me has been a good tip. But yeah, maturity is definitely an element here, and I really love the points you mentioned about the boss level, the highest. I mean, back in the days, I was like a hardcore gamer too, like top level of World of Warcraft hunter and my server in PvP, and
Yeah.
top Call of Duty player as well. And basically, yeah, like throwing myself against the best has always been a principle of mine. Nowadays I play chess and I do these games, but my question is the following. Like, yes, back in these days I've thrown myself with the three levels, three layers of difficulties with these three things: travel, sacred union, and starting a business. Would I recommend it to do it again? How hard was it? It was quite hard, and I feel that I even now to this day I'm still solving part of these problems that started 7 years ago of like magnifying these three things together. But I love the thrill of it, and I feel like it's essential to the growth that I want to reach with the moonshots that I have. So, what is the equilibrium between setting overly ambitious goals and setting up yourself in critical environments to grow, and the fine line between burning out? Like nowadays I feel that I'm not challenging myself enough. What So the first question is, what is the fine line? And the second is, how can one like you and I, for example, challenge yourselves to an even greater level of growth? Now you have children's, I have some kind of stability right now. How can we challenge ourselves up to a higher level once we reach that kind of plateau?
Yeah. Yeah. So two things come to mind. The first is alignment, and the second is rest and release, the Sabbath. And so I'll start with the second one there. I got to a point in the chaos where I was of my business where I was working every day and all the time, right? And as a business owner, it's just a really easy thing to do. And so the problem with that is it one, it will burn everyone out, no
Yeah.
matter what Elon Musk might try to get around. Um,
Well, he sucks at relationships, so like,
yeah, yeah. So there's a cost. So, but there's a cost to yourself and to others and whatnot, and that kind of ties into the alignment. But before I jump into there, so what I had a friend, I was just in that chaos, and I somehow asked a friend something, and he said, "Have you stopped taking a Sabbath?" And so as a Christian, once a week we take a Sabbath where we take a day off from work
okay,
and we spend time with God and family. But the principle there is that you're taking a break from the rest of your life. It's a bit of a kind of a safe haven from your work. And so um, I'd lost that part of my life. And so I took my life back by taking that Sabbath back. And by doing that, what it did is it created a kind of, think of like Gandalf in the Mines of Moria. He puts the staff down and says, "You shall not pass to the Balrog." That's kind of what it is. And what it is it's multifaceted, but practically, what it does is it creates a dynamic that when I'm working every day and all the time, it mentally enables procrastination,
mm,
and it diminishes motivation. And
got it.
so if I have to do this thing today and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be working after dinner, so I'll do it then, right? And then I get to after dinner and I'm just like, I'm like, I don't want to work on that because I don't have any energy. So maybe I work on something else. So it kind of keeps kicking the can down the
True.
road mentally. So having like a break, like having a time, and this is one of the things when I became a freelancer, I defined how many hours I wanted to work each week. And so for me, it was, and I wanted to do it during the work week. So Monday through Friday, I think it was like a 45-hour window that I was going to work. And so at the end of the day, I'm done. And on the weekends, I don't work. And that creates these barriers to rest, to recover from the burnout, or not to get burned out because I'm resting along the way. Because burnout is usually not resting along the way for a long enough period where the rest essentially, it's like a repo man collecting a car that you haven't paid payments on. When you haven't rested, burnout comes for you, and you don't have a choice. It's just we end up getting depressed and unmotivated, and so on and so forth. So that's taking those breaks is huge. And what that also does is it forces constraints, and constraints are our best friends for creating focus and motivation. I'll give you an example. So I might have too much work to do in a particular week, but I have constraints, so I have to get what I need to get done in those constraints. So now it forces me to think, all right, if I only have this much time to do this week, let's say I've got 40 hours to work on things, but I have 50 hours of things to do. I have to look at those things and go, which are most important. So it forces a prioritization. So now I'm going, well, what is the most important? So I'll do those first, and then I'll work on the other stuff. And that way, whatever doesn't get done is not a high priority thing that got missed. And so it creates clarity and focus and drives motivation. And then all of that kind of ties into the alignment piece, which is we humans have a way of compartmentalizing things. But what and there's a lot of talk about this idea of like work-life balance and things like that. I actually like the idea of work-life unity, where our work is actually in alignment with our aim. So when I think about my freelancing, it's a vehicle, it's a car that I'm driving towards a destination. So what's I need to have clarity on the destination, and freelancing needs to be taking me there. And a lot of people don't necessarily have clarity on that destination for what their work is supposed to accomplish or what their business is supposed to accomplish. And so getting that clarity is helpful. Now, how does that work practically? So I'll give you an example. In terms of aligning all the various variables that are playing out. So for me, when I shut down the company, that was one of the decisions I made to realize that this wasn't the path I wanted to take. But the path I wanted to take wasn't something I could just do that day. I had to provide for my wife and my kids. I have five kids, and I'm married. And so we have financial obligations and things we have to take care of. And I can't just neglect them and pursue my goals, right? So the alignment is about how do I pursue my goals and take care of my responsibility? And that forces a plan that addresses both. If I were to pursue my self-interest at the neglect of my wife or at the neglect of my kids, then I'm not actually generating anything good at all, because I'm generating something for myself at their cost. But if I can pursue something that benefits them and doesn't neglect them, then I've come up with an alignment. And so my work needs to align with those goals and my responsibilities and duty and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I'm also wondering, on the flip side of things, when people get comfortable, um, me, especially as a man, I feel the need to provide, and it's not in the responsibility sense of things. It's just that I feel fulfilled when I
Yeah.
bring stuff back to the house, whether it's food or water.
Hmm.
I'm, just like man word, hunters, and
Yeah.
they alphas, like they bring back the
Yeah.
meats back to the tribe. Um, what is the equilibrium between staying in one's comfort zone and too much suffering? For example, Jesus carried the cross. He walked out and gave speeches on a daily basis. Back in the days, the conditions were especially harsh. We didn't
Yeah.
have much technology. Walk in the dark with predators. Sleeping outside in the cold night, for example, and yeah, the constant threat of the authority, speaking in front of many and attracted unwanted attention. Jesus got out of his comfort zone quite a lot, and he seemed to be very happy
Yeah.
as a result. So what is, if someone is out of is inside his comfort zone and doesn't feel truly happy and fulfilled, how can they push themselves out of that comfort zone without burning out?
Yeah, yeah. So a few things come to mind. Well, one is funny. When Jesus goes into the desert where he's tempted, there is a comment there about he goes into the wilderness with the wild beasts. So that's kind of interesting overlay there. Um, when I became a freelancer after I shut down the company and became a freelancer, and I had these responsibilities, there was a lot of motivation to survive, right? Like, hey, I've got to figure this out because there are people that are relying on me. So that kind of gets to your point about the
And how much
purpose.
is that a false construct? Surviving, yes, striving. Because even up to this day, even you and I must have some thoughts sometimes of, am I just surviving? Oh, there's this recession. I think sometimes it's stories we invent ourselves. The anxiety demon in our head kind of tries to keep us at bay from being happy. How much is the reality vs how much is the story?
Yeah. So I think, well, let me tell a story, and that might give some clarity here. So I had a
Sure.
friend who he was kind of maybe in that bucket, and he was very successful financially, and he lived very frugally. So he had a lot of financial margin. And we were talking one day, and he was anxious just on the financial side of things, which I think was just some kind of a surface level story. But what I asked him is, I said, if you were to stop working and you didn't change your lifestyle at all, but you just lived off of whatever you've accumulated to this date, how long could you live before you started, needing money again, right? And he said 10 years, right? So 10 years, no changes, but
Dude,
and so
10
in my
years.
mind, I'm thinking, wow, like I would love to have 2 years or 1 year, or
10 years
3 months.
just too much. It's like 10 years,
So
man. 10
yeah,
years.
so
Decade.
that's a lot of anxiety to accommodate. Now, if you understand his story, it makes more sense. He had a situation where he had a lot and he lost it all. So 10
Okay.
years wasn't enough because he
So
lost more
it's
than 10
trauma.
years.
It's definitely trauma in that case.
So that's a dynamic for sure, the trauma. And I think there's a real sense of like, well, I need to provide for what's in front of me.
Yeah.
We got to eat today, we got to live in our house, we got to pay for our mortgage. And so there's sort of a month to month type of anxiety, then there's like a year to year anxiety. You also have to, are we saving for retirement, or thinking ahead?
Mm.
So those dynamics definitely play a role. I think there's definitely two tensions that I felt as a freelancer. One was when I first started freelancing, I gotta survive because the bear's chasing us, and that we have these real obligations in front of us. But as I got more success, as I got traction as a freelancer, and I was able to create a steady stream of income, I was able to build a financial reservoir to cushion myself from the ups and downs. Now all of a sudden, that tension, that motivation to survive kind of dissipates because I've essentially
Mm.
created a wall around the fortress, right? And so now the bears can't get in, at least not easily. So now and this is kind of more where I am now, is how do I create a motivation? How do I foster motivation to motivate myself when that survival instinct is gone? I have to facilitate that. So I'll give you a couple examples of how I've done that. When I wrote my first book, Path of the Freelancer, I got a group of freelancers together, and I said, hey, I want to write this book. You are all freelancers, so you'd benefit from the content. So why don't we get together once a month for a year? And I'll go through each chapter every time we get together once a month. And that'll help me hold me accountable to finish writing the book. And then you could give your feedback, so it helps me make it better, and you learn some things along the way. So that was one thing. For the second book, The Jump, I was having a hard time finishing it. So I ended up doing a weekday blogging challenge with some other friends. And that I used those blogging posts to help me finish the last sections that I hadn't done yet. And so there's something about community and accountability, and also having a shared project together to help finish some of those things. So when you look at someone who runs a marathon, the end of the marathon is a bunch of people cheering and celebrating them on, right? And I think in terms of finishing well, I'll just say that as much as we might want to be independent, we are dependent creatures as humans, and so we need other people, and we can't finish well without other people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
We're very social creatures, still up to this day. Got me wondering, while listening to you, if most billionaires are motivated by fear, And greed could be a synonym. Also, greed is very much like, hey, all for me and none for you, just because I want to survive. And how cool can it be to be a billionaire and not be motivated by fear? I think Elon is that type of billionaire that he doesn't give a crap about money. And I think that this would be the path that I would recommend. If for your friend that had the 10 years of runway, dude, why don't you not burn all this cash, but make it inaccessible from one day to the next and truly face your fears, which are being penniless. um, or if you're being a silly example. Okay, I've got two in my personal life. One was going to Vegas for a bachelor's party. I was kind of scared by that, and although the experience was not that interested, I faced my fear. Another
Yeah.
very silly one. This weekend, my wife got me back on an app called Bumble, not to make a second wife, but to make friends.
Yeah.
There's a friends option on Bumble, and I felt very uncomfortable just going back there and swiping people and putting
Yeah.
myself out there on the friends market, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
an interesting experiment here. And I love it because I put myself out there, and I was having trauma discussions with my wife this weekend. And I wrote something on my Twitter the other day, which is that you can't be traumatized twice. So basically, I'm going on this app called Bumble, and even up to this day, well, today I feel less scared just thinking about Bumble and reaching out to friends. I think once your brain faces a negative stimulus and you let it sleep and you let time pass, he understands that it's not life or death. And also putting myself in these situations continuously diminishes the fear. So would you encourage people to face most of their fears to live a more happier life
Yes. So I
in
do.
a
I feel
controlled
that
environment, that is?
ideally it would be in a controlled environment. Although we eventually get to a place where that controlled environment, we leave that. And
Yeah.
in fact, when I think about my marketing company, I think of it that way. Like this was an opportunity for me to face fears and issues in a controlled environment, because I learned a lot of lessons that I've also seen people learn in a public, large scale situation.
Yeah.
Um, that I'm like, okay, I'm glad I learned that at a small level. I don't want to have
Yeah.
to learn that in a giant space. And the book I'm working on my third book, which kind of is essentially around that idea of facing ourselves, facing our fears. I would say it's facing our fears is part of that, but I would actually say that there's more to it than just facing our fears. Um, and so this idea of who's really in the mirror, and I think I, th- I think a lot of the times we are uh, we see ourselves, in some ways we see ourselves worse than we really are, in other ways we see ourselves as
Always.
better.
That's the default. Yeah.
And so the idea is, who are we really, and who are we really? Like when I moved here from Arizona, there were a lot of aspects of myself that came out because of the crises and the chaos and the trouble, that, like, okay, that was scary. A monster came out of came out of me, but it was me. It wasn't something else. It was me. And
Yeah.
so, if you've never been in those types of crunches, um, it's hard to know who you really are, because you haven't been in a situation that you've been pushed to kind of the deepest parts of you to come out. And
100%.
so, but facing our fears head on is, um, I would encourage it, but at the same time, I question how much we can truly do that, in the sense that there has to be something greater on the other side of that. So I can't just face my fears for its own sake. I can't just suffer because I want to suffer, right?
Yeah.
There has to be something greater. And I think in your case with the Bumble, I think there's something there that you were chasing or pursuing or wanting to gain, not just something to run away from, but also something to gain on the other side of that. So I think we have
100%.
to have whatever it is that's going to pull us through the fear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, lots. The Bumble, I think it's everything that's synonym with my past life. Same for Vegas, which was at one point, being the best alcoholic there was. At another, was the best Tinder hunter there
Hmm.
was. Like all of these things resurface, and my new life is like, hey, I've gone such a long way. I'm such a better person now and so much happier than before. And I don't want to come back to that life. I think these are the fears, and I need to. I mean, yeah, that's angel or demon, depending on how you view it, needs to has a point. It needs to be listened to somewhat, but um, I need to face as much fears as possible so I can practice that muscle. And when it comes to just knowing that I can face any fear and not fear anything, or not having these little bad habits of, hey, do not go there because this is scary. I want to eliminate fear as much as possible, except I mean, fighting a lion or a tiger, which is
Yeah,
oddly on my bucket list. uh,
yeah.
I might not survive that one, but yeah, I think as much as I can work out the muscle, I will do. We've got 2 minutes left in the interview,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
want to make sure we make the best time here. What tip would you have for entrepreneurs that are starting their ventures? Then I want you to do the same exercise for starting a relationship, and then I want you to do the same exercise with starting a family. So three question in one.
Yeah, so I would boil probably the answer would be similar with just different application, which would be, getting clarity on intentions.
Okay.
And I have this idea of this concept called the formula for intentionality.
Yeah.
And what it is it's purpose, which is our why. Why are we doing it? Mission, which is our how. How are we going to go about it? And then values, guidelines. Within what guidelines are we going to follow as we're pursuing this? And then those are the ingredients of the formula. And then if you put them all together, they equal the vision, which is the destination. So mission plus purpose plus values equals vision. And so principally what I would say for yourself as a person is to answer those four things.
Mhm.
And then to answer them for your marriage, for your and for your business project. It could even be for a, like, here's a book project I'm doing or a podcast I'm running. Having clarity on intentions, and so then you have clarity of intentionality. Then you need accountability, so you have to tell people about it. You have to tell the people involved, like, this is what we're intending to do. But reality doesn't always match our intentions, so we have to have accountability to hold ourselves accountable to those intentions, so that we make those intentions real. And we need others to do that. So is that a good enough answer for you?
That's a very good answer. And just a last side note here, this may take a while to be clear, and this
Yeah.
needs to be constantly updated. So have a draft, a
Hmm.
semi-clean draft, but also revisit it as much as you can, because that might change. So we've got less than a minute left. I just want to take that time for you to tell people where they can find you, Jason.
Yeah, yeah. So go to jasonscottmontoya.com. That's jasonscottmontoya.com. I blog, I got a podcast. My book links to my books are on there, which are available on Amazon, either physical or digital, Kindle edition. You can read various content that I've got going on there, and I'm also on social media, and you can find those links on jasonscottmontoya.com as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason. Have a
All
good
right,
day.
thanks, Charles.
Bye.